So when I was asking about this coming from a respected source, this evaluation scheme, model, whatever, I was, hoping to hear it came from somewhere in academia where it might have been peer reviewed, or from a government agency where it might have been adopted after public review. I wasn't really thinking, it would be just our consultant, even if she has worked in the field before. Doesn't sound like there's a published model that the DOJ used or anything like that. It would be great if we're going to adopt a model like this. This is the sort of policy decision that I think needs to first be proposed and go out for public comment, and then be discussed robustly, so commissioners can get input on its validity. My next question is if, Ms. Mather, if you did any sensitivity analysis or did any sort of analysis to assess the validity of this scheme. If you've, okay, now we're recording in progress here. I was just wondering if you did any sensitivity analysis to, show how much a small change in one parameter would affect the overall score, or generally how to assess the validity of this against our statutory mandate. Did you do any sensitivity analysis here?
Yeah, well, if you think of sensitivity analysis, the only thing that we did was we looked at the Polsby-Papper test, and yesterday we had this recommendation. The way we were looking at that, if there were if the number of districts that met the Polsby-Papper test of being greater than 0.2, we said we would give it a score of 1 if one district had it, or 2, or whatever districts had it. But yesterday there was the suggestion that let's take a look at the average or the total of it. And we did try that, but did not give us any better results. But once again, I want to emphasize that this data, I would like you to focus more on the data that is being produced here, which was going to be helpful to you, rather than worrying about which way we did it, because this is something which is being developed or being we are trying to evaluate it. But I think what is more useful to you would be the data. How many splits do we have? And we have actually prepared data, which cities or what is being split, that we can provide you once you choose to move forward with a plan. So I would focus more on the data.
So thanks for providing those data. That's good. But I don't necessarily we need to have a scheme. I just think we need to have a scheme to rate those data in a quantitative scoring method. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, was there anything in the contract that we have with you that requires you to develop one of these models? We're spending a lot of time on this, and I want to make sure it's actually something you're supposed to be doing. Evaluation.
Well, that's a very good question. We are just trying to support the commission, and you do not, whichever way you want us, we went out and we looked at the data, and we are trying to provide ways that would make it easier for you to analyze the plans. So you don't have to use the model. It's something that we thought could be useful. So we brought it forward, and it corresponds to the redistricting criteria that the commission has.
Okay, thank you for that. I just have a couple of quick questions about the neighborhood councils part of this. The neighborhood councils, you listed there are 99 neighborhood councils in the city of LA. Does that include, is that just all of the neighborhood councils that are formed pursuant to the LA City Charter, or does that include some of the other organizations that represent geographic areas and are active in city politics, like community councils or residents associations that work in areas that don't have official city charter-based neighborhood councils? Do you know if it's just the city charter?
This is a data set which is provided by the city of Los Angeles. There is another data set that we have heard about, and that is called the LA Times data set. So there are several, but this one is made available by the city of Los Angeles.
If I
And
may,
Kayla can add more to that.
the data set is the official neighborhood councils established by city charter.
Okay, thanks. And so, not that doesn't cover, right, all of LA. So the last question, how many of the so-called redistricting units here, the RDUs, how many of the RDU areas cross neighborhood council boundaries? So, if you select an RDU, thinking that that doesn't have any splits in it, you might have actually split a neighborhood council. How many RDUs areas cross neighborhood council boundaries?
I do not have that number. I did not do that, but we can provide that information.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher.
I don't really have a question. I'm a little frustrated that the conversation we had yesterday wasn't reflected fully in the revised metric. But I do think it was clear from the beginning that we asked ArcBridge to help us take the submitted maps and cluster or group them for us so that we could have a reduced set to consider and be more efficient. So I do think this is clearly within the scope of what we've contracted for them to do.
Are there any more clarification questions before we take public comment? Commissioner Wong?
Yes, thank you. Priti, I guess did you say that you actually did not score the, I guess, majority minority districts in this particular model? Or did you include that? I just need that clarification.
That is something which is not included in what I am showing to you today, because based on what we heard yesterday, we had used total population, but the recommendation was to use CVAP, and that data was still being worked on. So for this presentation, we did not include that, but that should be included.
Just to clarify, because I believe that I may have mentioned that I wanted the CVAP included. I think we need both of those numbers, right? Because for the actual lines, we have to use total population, but we do have to make sure that the CVAP is also over 50%. So yes. Anyway, then I think there might be just a little problem with this rating right now, because it doesn't include what I believe is one of the most important criteria that we should be looking at. Thank you.
If that's all the questions of clarification, then we can take public comment.
Yes, let's go right to public comment now. Ty?
Okay, so we have a few in queue. So let me go ahead and just take over the screen so we have the timer. So first we have David Peterson. David, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself. And if you're comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment. And again, as a reminder for members of the public, if you are interested in making a public comment, please put in the Q&A your name and the agenda item. So David, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. I'm Dave Peterson, General Manager of the Las Virgenes Municipal Water District. We're a special district that provides retail water and wastewater services to 4 cities and unincorporated county area in the westernmost portion of LA County. And I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you all for the work that you're doing on behalf of the county. I realize what a challenging job you have. Just 2 comments. Our preference as a special district would be, if possible, to maintain our district all within one supervisorial district, if that is possible. The other thing is, I would suggest that you consider, among all of the things that you need to, similarities and differences in resource management issues. And specifically what I mean is water, land, air, and wildlife. And I think that may help to guide some of your decisions. In looking at the maps, there's a lot of them, but OP010 seems to strike the right balance. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I do see a hand from Commissioner Orpanela Segura.
Yes, this is a question of clarification for David. I'm not sure if he's still on. Okay. Can you describe what Las Virgenes' service area is? I'm not familiar with the water district.
Yeah, and good. Thank you for asking. We serve the cities of Calabasas, Hidden Hills, Agoura Hills, and Westlake Village. And then we also serve the unincorporated county areas in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. Next, we have Melanie Winter. Melanie, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And if you're comfortable, you may share your video. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment. Melanie, whenever you're ready, please unmute yourself.
Got it. There you go. Hi, I'm Melanie Winter. I'm the director of the River Project. We're a nonprofit here in Los Angeles working on watershed management. I would encourage the commission, as Dave said, to consider the natural geographic boundaries that help us with resource management. The state and county have both invested significant resources in planning efforts based around watershed boundaries for climate resilience, water. The county's investment in the Integrated Regional Water Management Program and Measure W are organized around such boundaries. And the county recently adopted the Upper LA River Tributaries Plan. So this territory includes the lands that all drain to the San Fernando Valley Basin and extend down through the Elysian Valley to the 110. Map 4, 27, I think 10, and a couple other maps that keep the San Fernando Valley whole while also keeping the Upper LA River catchment area in one district would allow for better administration and stewardship of the river, flooding issues, climate resilience, water, groundwater, tributaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Next, we have Lucy Demirjeon of City of South Pasadena. Lucy, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And if you're comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you. My name is Lucy Demirjeon, and I am speaking on behalf of the City of South Pasadena. As a small city in the western San Gabriel Valley, South Pasadena has established relationships with the cities in the San Gabriel Valley. The city strongly supports districts that maintain South Pasadena within the same supervisorial district as our neighboring cities in the San Gabriel Valley, given historic ties, demographic and economic similarities, shared legislative and municipal objectives. These communities are interconnected and have been working collectively for years to address homelessness, affordable housing, transportation and mobility issues, water, air quality, and environmental issues. South Pasadena and the greater San Gabriel Valley cities would like to continue this work going forward on various regional issues that best serve our communities. Our city council is engaged in your redistricting process and will be making further comments on the options for maps down the line.
Thank you, Lucy. Next, we have Tim Sanchez. Tim, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself, and if you're comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tim Sanchez. I'm with Latinos for Fair Representation, and I'm really concerned about the conversation you guys are having about the community splits and neighborhood splits and the total disregard of minority populations. It's a Latino majority, a minority majority county. We need to do a better job of making sure we're inclusive of the immigrant communities. Community splits, communities can be very diverse, and some folks have Latino communities or African American communities. I think this focus on not splitting cities or communities can sometimes disempower Latino communities. I think we have to be very careful that we go down that path. And if we're going to do it, let's weigh it, but don't put it at the same category as minority empowerment. I also think it's really important that we don't put deviation with the amount of underpopulation and census undercounts. We need to have deviations near 10%. So the Latino community truly is represented, because there was a significant undercount in these communities, and we need to make sure they're represented.
Thank you, Tim. I believe that's all for item 5A. Co-chairs, would you like to close public comments on 5A?
Yes, public comment is closed on 5A. I'd like to go round robin now for commissioner comments.
So we're going to start with Commissioner Obregon.
No, all the issues you guys talked about were all kind of sticking out in my head. So everything, all my concerns have already been expressed. The idea, maybe we can proceed to the maps and give Pretty and Arkbridge a little more direction in what we expect and want now. And so we need to, maybe start to select maps that we like her to give special attention to. Thank you.
Commissioner Orbanela Segura.
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Thank you. No questions at this time.
Commissioner Zaida Soto.
No questions at this time, but do appreciate the last commenter's thoughts and reflections. I'll be thinking about that.
Commissioner Stetcher.
I think that having an updated metric that matched the conversation we had yesterday would be helpful to us in sorting. That's all.
Commissioner Vento. I'm sorry, Commissioner Vento, I couldn't hear you. I believe your audio isn't working.
Commissioner Vento suggested we move on and then return to him.
Okay.
Okay, let's do that.
Co-Chair Williams.
No questions. I just want to comment. I'm having problems with Wi-Fi, so most of the screen is frozen. I am able to hear the audio, and because of the Wi-Fi connections here, I'm actually on my phone, but I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Wong.
Yes, thank you. I think that it would be, as Commissioner Stetcher said, to have kind of an updated metric, although I don't feel comfortable that the metric that is being used reflects what we necessarily discussed yesterday. So, and so I'm not sure, how to use that information. And I don't myself personally feel comfortable proposing selected maps until we could get the last couple of maps as I requested. I believe it's map number 12. I think it's the People's Block, and map number 23, which is Moldov's maps, analyzed, because I actually think and I think per the public comment, one of the most important criteria that we should be using or looking at is, you know, the majority minority or minority majority districts, you know, however you want to label it. I think we all know what we mean. You know, if there can be Latino districts drawn and then other minority influencing districts. So I would, you know, like that information but before I actually propose some maps. Otherwise, if we were to have to propose some maps, I would include those 2 maps as a couple of my choices in addition to some others. Thank you.
Commissioner Franklin?
No questions.
Commissioner Holtzman?
First, a point of order here. I hear a bunch of commissioners saying no questions as we go around. Isn't this the time for discussion rather than questions for commissioners to give their opinions on this agenda item?
It's the first round of the ability to make comments, questions.
Clarifying
analysis,
questions. I didn't have any clarifying questions.
Yeah, the clarifying questions.
My question, aren't we done with clarifying questions and now we're on discussion? Right?
Well, there may well be additional, but this is the time for discussion. Yes, Commissioner.
So could we make sure we circle back to the commissioners who just said no questions to see if they have thoughts to offer?
I'm certain that we will be engaging additional comments as we go. This will not be just one round.
Okay, much appreciated. I just wanted to point that out because I didn't want people, commissioners to miss the opportunity to offer their thoughts. So with regards to this agenda item, then, first of all, I did want to point out that I submitted, I don't know, 2 or 3 more maps today. I know I've submitted quite a few maps compared to other commissioners and other members of the public, and wanted to let you know that by tomorrow's meeting, I will probably just, you know, choose 2 or 3 of those maps that I want to have continued for continued consideration. But you know, I'll tell you my top choices of my own maps. But please have a look at them. I actually can't tell which ones I've submitted for some reason until they're posted on the hub or by Ty here. So my general thing on the presentation by ArcBridge part of this agenda item, the general comment is I'm very worried about using this evaluation scheme in any way. I don't think it's particularly valid. And my main concern really is that commissioners, you know, it may be, you know, it may be intended for commissioners to do this, or it may just be commissioners will do this, but I'm concerned commissioners will use an evaluation scheme, points evaluation scheme like this to as a crutch, basically, you know, so they can be a little bit lazy and avoid having to examine the maps and the data on their own and use their independent judgment. So I really strongly urge us to discard this evaluation scheme in its entirety, and let's get to discussing just the data about the maps and not how to weight the data with points. It reminds me of some other, you know, point-weighted evaluation schemes that have been thrown at us in the past. It's you know, it tends to skew the discussion, and I say let's get rid of it. Thank you.
Co-Chair Maeda, I see there are a couple of hands, but we haven't finished the round robin. How would you like to proceed?
I want to finish the round robin first before we go to anywhere else.
Okay. Commissioner Kenny?
Yes, and I would like to apologize. I'm on an unstable internet connection, and that's why I've stopped my video sharing. But I think that the data that Pretty has gathered is useful to analyze these maps. I don't think that the overall scoring is valid. For example, the 3 models are alternative the COI models are alternative models. So the map is going to, any one map is going to conform to one model better than the other two. That doesn't mean that it's a better or a worse map. It would be, I think the raw data is helpful, but I don't think the overall score is valid.
Okay, Co-Chair Maeda.
So if you watched yesterday or were here, you heard me indicate that I was very skeptical about the validity of this model. I appreciate Commissioner Holtzman's questions about the sourcing and verification, et cetera. I share those concerns. I don't think that the model has been substantially improved from the criticism that we heard yesterday in terms of it's improving its validity. I thought in any event, it would only possibly help us sort of, get some rough sense that certain maps might be better than others to concentrate on. But in any event, I suspect that none of us or few of us will be looking at the model as the basis to sort these out. But we're doing what we can to try to analyze all of the maps and make those determinations. I do want to go through the end of the round robin, and then what I would like to do would be to ask Commissioner Stetcher to talk about his grouping analysis and see whether that might be one useful way to move forward in terms of trying to wrap our arms around these maps. But before I do that, I do also have to say that not having analysis for two very significant maps, as Commissioner Wong indicated, the People's Block map and the MALDEF map, these are organizations that have been following the Commission's proceedings all year long. They obviously took a great deal of time and care into putting those maps together. And, I feel handicapped in not having all of the data available to analyze those maps in particular. But, in any event, let's complete the round robin. I will then recognize the couple of hands that have gone up if there was some specific kinds of comments that you want to make. I believe it's Organella Segura and Sider Soto, then we'll have those. But then I would like to go to Commissioner Stetcher, but let's complete the round robin first.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Thank you. I share generally the same sentiment as Commissioner Stetcher. The tool for evaluation today doesn't look like it has incorporated what we talked about tomorrow. Specifically, as Commissioner Morales points out, and I may have mentioned yesterday too, these 348 statistical areas, I'll call it that, 88 of which are cities. I still don't know if a city is treated in the same manner as an unincorporated area in terms of weighting and how it really kind of works through this model, and if it makes any difference that there's a city or an unincorporated area. So I guess I come away with not that much confidence in this model, but I'm not sure what the answer is. It's not clear. I'm listening to everything that's being said. Who's driving it? Where did it come from? There's a lot of good information, and we have to figure out how best to move forward so that we can move very quickly to figure out how best to make a selection. Thank you.
Commissioner Morales.
Yeah, I think I'm just along the same vein. It's like this tool is obviously not going to help us to prioritize maps in the way that we intended it to, just the way that they're presented right now. Also, just to echo Commissioner Wong's concern around the CVAP as well. We definitely have to take that into consideration as well. And I know other folks have had their hands up, so I'll stop here.
And then coming back to Commissioner Vento.
No comments.
And then, so we had two hands from commissioners, Commissioner Orpanella Segura, and then Commissioner Snyder Soto.
In the interest of time, I'll go ahead and just remove my comment.
Commissioner Snyder Soto?
Yeah, I think I certainly need, I'd like to focus in on sort of this question of minority majority districts and how we might evaluate that. Also weighing the CVAP numbers. And so while I haven't finished reviewing all maps, I think I would like to go back with some of that updated information and review them again. So I'm definitely wondering whether it means we need to adjust our timeline on review. I know we don't really have much flexibility, but I'm wondering what we're thinking about, given that this is our second day of meeting and we haven't quite gotten through it all. Nor are we close to reviewing our maps, I think.
So if the commission will indulge me, I've been having some email exchange conversations, I guess, with Commissioner Stetcher in terms of trying to figure out how we can get a sense of all the different maps. And he has a particular proposal, I guess I would call it, a way of trying to analyze these that I want to recognize him and have him explain what that is and see if that might help us move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Maeda.
Thank you. I spent a lot of time looking at the maps, and I found it very difficult and time-consuming to do a micro-analysis of each one. But as I looked at them, it seemed to me there were lots of similarities. There were maps that tackled the problem in similar ways. For example, anchoring the San Fernando Valley as a complete unit and then building around that, or making the San Gabriel Valley whole and building around that. And as I looked at them, I formed some impressions about groups of maps that reflected the same approach to our big communities of interest, the ones we've heard the most about on a large scale. And so this list is my construction of some groupings that I think we might be able to use to frame our discussion. And the groupings are maps that keep the San Fernando Valley whole. There are about a dozen of those. Maps that keep the San Gabriel Valley whole. And as you can see on these rows, there were maps that kept the south central part of Los Angeles whole. Maps that kept the coastline together, maps that developed a new kind of a central, primarily Latinx district on a diagonal going from the valley down through East LA. Maps that, and most of these maps kept the North County together, but there were also some that split the north part of the county. There were a couple of maps that created pie slices. And it seemed to me that we might be able to go forward by looking at these in chunks. And what we would do is we would pick up one category, say the maps that keep the San Gabriel Valley together. If we had ArcBridge's metric, we could use it to rank them, and that would give us a starting point for looking at 2 or 3 and discussing them. But if we don't have the metric, then perhaps each of the commissioners' votes could be used to identify maps in this category. And then we could say, look at map 4 and 10, see how they differed, talk about what aspects we liked, and tell ArcBridge to develop a new map for us that keeps the San Fernando Valley together, and it differs from maps 4 and 10 in the following ways. And then we could proceed through the other clusters of maps. And it was my idea of how we could make some progress on actually getting through things. I will admit up front that there are some shortcomings to this list and my method. One shortcoming is there are probably some errors, which I hope commissioners would point out as we went through. I might have missed a map or put one in the wrong place. A second is that some maps appear multiple times because they did more than one thing. They kept the San Gabriel Valley together, and they also kept the coastal counties together. And the third is that there were some kind of groupings that I didn't include. So it's not completely comprehensive. I didn't make up a separate group of maps that kept Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena together. But I did think it was pretty obvious when we looked at the others whether they did that. And I didn't make up a separate group that kept the foothill communities connected with North County, or the foothill communities on the east side connected with North County. So there are gaps in this, but I offer it as a possible way to move forward, recognizing that there are some repeated patterns in the maps that we saw about big chunks that we could then begin to look at the little pieces, and in particular, look more in depth at the racial and ethnic breakdown, the number of districts that have minority majorities, etc.
And Commissioner Stetcher, would it be your thought that we would, at this point, like take one of these groupings and begin discussing all of the maps that you've identified within those groupings?
Well, my hope was that we would have a metric to be able to say the ones that were most respectful of communities of interest and of racial groupings were 8 and 18, and we could start there. Without the metric, I don't know how we pick a subset of those to start talking about. But yes, it would be to talk about all maybe the San Fernando Valley retaining maps at the same time.
Could we go to the, could you stop sharing screen? I guess it's Gayla's screen. Pretty, you have a comment?
My comment is that I guess since yesterday and today we were trying to look at all possible maps, and we were busy collecting the metric, collecting the data that could be fed into the metric. So we could still look at things if you thought it would be useful, but it's just as you can see, it's a lot of data that we were processing, so we were doing a lot of catching up. So that is all I wanted to say, because out of 27 maps, we have processed 25 and gathered the data for them. And that was our main focus. So I can understand that you may be looking for more changes in the model, but we have all those things that you have talked about. It's just that gathering the data, because since yesterday and today we have 27. Yesterday we had only 23.
So I am open to hearing some ideas from the commissioners as to what they think of Commissioner Stetcher's grouping way to analyze these maps, or if you have some other alternative that you think would be a good way to proceed to discuss the maps. I should just back up one step, which is to say that one possibility is to have the commissioners come to the meeting tomorrow, as just as an example, with 3 maps that they think are their top 3 for that they would like the commission to really dig into and consider more. And then we could put those up and see if there's some patterns that might emerge as to, there's a consensus that seems to be developing that this ought to be one of the maps we need to further discuss, or these 2 or 3. Or maybe if there's any that are just no one else seems to think it's particularly worth discussing, then we'll have that person who put that idea in to, explain why they did what they did, if they want to still advocate for it. And as some way of moving towards some sense of what are the maps we should be focusing on. And perhaps by looking at these in terms of groupings, you can say, well, one of my priorities, or one of the things I'm thinking about is keeping the San Fernando Valley together, and or keeping San Gabriel Valley together. What are the maps that do those things effectively? And you could say, well, here's several maps that do both of those things, and those are maybe favored in your mind, and you think, okay, which is the one that I like the best, and maybe that will be one you'd put forward tomorrow, something like that. That's my thought. But why don't we go ahead and take some commissioner comments then. Ty, I don't know whether you've been keeping track of the comments as they've come up, but.
Yeah, we have Commissioner Kenny, then Commissioner Holtzman, and Commissioner Wong.
I like Co-Chair Maeda's proposal, which he also made yesterday, that we come up with our 3 maps that we would like to pursue and see where it's kind of a straw vote in a way, which maps we think are worth further consideration. We need to use our own individual knowledge and experience of Los Angeles County, in addition to the hours that we have spent listening to the comments, however unrepresentative they might be. I still think we've gotten a lot of valuable comments, and we've listened to them. And we're never going to have all the data we want. I think it's too bad that Pretty hasn't been able to give us more data. She says she's analyzed 25 or 26 maps, but I don't have that data available. But nevertheless, I think we need to move forward, and we have a lot of knowledge without the information that Pretty can put together, and we should move forward on that basis.
Commissioner Holtzman, then Commissioner Wong.
With regard to Commissioner Stetcher's groupings, I think that is the sort of thing I was expecting ArcBridge to do. I think could be very useful. I thought ArcBridge would be grouping maps in terms of similarities like that, and I would love to direct ArcBridge to do that, to pick up on Commissioner Stetcher's work there. So I just have one more thing on the rating scheme of things. People have brought up CVAP a lot tonight, and I remember from watching yesterday there was some question about the CVAPs not adding up to 100%, and there was supposed to be some follow-up on that. So my question is whether the CVAP percentages we see use as the denominator the population in 2019 when the CVAP counts were estimated, or do they use the current population denominator with the 2019 CVAP counts, in which case they wouldn't add up to 100%. Can anybody answer that?
Rick, do you know the answer to that?
CVAP numbers are estimates, and they should add up to 100%. And we went and we looked at it. The percentage is calculated based on total population, total CVAP population as available in the application.
But is it using the 2019 population as the denominator, or the most recent census population?
It's using the 2019
Okay.
total CVAP.
And the 2019 total population.
CVAP total population.
Oh, yeah, total CVAP. Okay. All right. So it should add up to 100. Thank you.
So there was a mistake on the first map we looked at.
There was.
Ah.
And whatever, if it's like a little close to 100%, then it's a rounding error that may be there, but it should add up to 100%.
Commissioner Wong?
Thank you. Yes. This is kind of funny or ironic, but I actually made a little chart or a grouping like Commissioner Stetcher did for myself, about keeping San Fernando Valley together, SGV together. I think my maps are like slightly different groupings, but be that as it may, I think that, it does help so that you can kind of see what maps have in common. But I think I was going to recommend that Ty had showed me how to kind of do some of the calculations that Priti had started to do in terms of calculating the CVAP numbers, for the different maps. And so I went ahead and did that. And I think it would be useful for the commissioners to see, because when in terms of like determining a majority and minority district, you can see that sometimes the maps use total population and it may propose 2 or 3 Latino districts. But when you then go to CVAP, because the percentages decreases so much, sometimes there's not even one majority minority district. So I think that that's a consideration that we should take into account. So that's an example of like one of the factors that I was looking at when I was looking at the maps. So that's just kind of, how I started to try to make some sense of the maps. But I guess it would be good. We don't have any choice but to come up with choosing several maps to move forward with. But I guess I would do that with the caveat that we may decide that we want to add another map to that, or else alter the map. When we can do that, I think at any time. We should be able to do that at any time, I'm hoping. But as I said before, 2 of the maps that I actually liked a lot, the People's Block and the MALDEF map, have not been analyzed in the same way. So I'm not sure how to, compare them with the other maps in some ways. So I would just ask Priti if she could provide that information for us, because I think it would be helpful for us. Thank you.
Co-Chair Williams?
I just want to agree. It's timely to be following Commissioner Wong, because I agree with her in a lot of what she said. I also want to thank Commissioner Stetcher for the work that he did. I think a lot of this provides some guides for us as we start to make these decisions. What's missing is additional analysis, or to have that available to us, it's analysis of all the maps received. And I know we received some between yesterday and today, might be receiving some more. I don't know if we'll be able to have that analysis completed, but what's important to me also are the CVAP and the VAP numbers as we start to look at the maps. And some more important than others. I agree, the ones by the People's Coalition, the People's Bloc, and MALDEF would be great to have that analysis. But I think what we have is a guide, and I would like to agree and support Co-Chair Maeda that we perhaps come tomorrow with our 3 tops maps and see where we go from there. But the question is, will we have the analysis of the additional maps, or maybe just a request that Priti provide that if possible? I think it's important for us to have that as we move forward.
Kriti, what do you think? Will you be able to do the analysis of those two PDF maps, the People's Block map and the MALDEF map, and provide that to all the commissioners sometime during the day tomorrow?
Let me work with Ty to see how we have the PDFs, and I believe we have shape files somewhere. Let me work with Ty and see if he can provide me those, then we can definitely process them.
Yeah, of course, just not only just having the shape files, which we can see on the hub, but also the corresponding population numbers would be very important. Let me try just, Commissioner Morales.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you take a look at the MALDEF map, when you scroll down, the way that the map is kind of displayed, and then the deviation, and then the CVAP numbers and the total population, it's very descriptive, and also the communities that it includes. I think that's a good way of looking at it and trying to capture some of the information that we need to make some of these decisions, or at least put the maps out there. So I just want to kind of,
yeah, it does have that, and the People's Block has narrative, but it doesn't, neither of them have the full population numbers. And I think that's what people would like to see, that apples to apples.
Yeah, and what I guess what I'm getting at is it's a much easier visual representation of what's going on than anything we've seen, you know. So I think that's helpful in that regard.
Thank you. Commissioner Holtzman.
First, I want to point out there's a second part to this agenda item that I don't want us to skip over, and that's whether or not we're going to invite people to present about their maps. And second of all, I wanted to offer to explain, I could do pretty quickly, the chart I submitted that you all saw last time about thinking about how residents should think about their representation after redistricting. What's your pleasure on that?
Well, so if you watched the meeting last night, you said you did. I think you got the sense that the commissioners are interested potentially in redoing map numbers because of the issues with voter delay, voter acceleration, but have not decided how significant or how high in the list of priorities, or if it should be the main thing or the last thing or whatever. So if your chart really addresses those issues, we could do that. I would prefer we spend tonight trying to get more, drilling down more into the maps if possible.
Okay, that's totally fine by me. Maybe I'll draft a very quick narrative explaining it, why I think it's related to this.
That might be helpful. If we could look at that apart from the meeting, that might be helpful. I know that Commissioner Stetcher also was almost ready to give us a lecture on why he didn't think it was that important to look at that. And we were all very curious, but at the same time, we just.
And that's pretty much the point of my chart, that it's not such a big deal.
Right. I assumed that was related. But let me try this and see if how this goes. I think it might be useful. We've all now, each of us, spent some significant amount of time, I'm sure, with the maps and the hub, and we I think have developed some impressions. Perhaps not full spreadsheet markings and breakdown and all that. But I think we have some impressions, and I think maybe it might be useful to go round robin and have each commissioner say what their thoughts and impressions are, if they have formed any. Not so much. I mean, it's okay if you say, "Oh, I really like map," whatever. That's okay. But I was thinking more in terms of, like, if I was doing, I would say, well, this is what I'm looking at. This is these are the criteria I find most compelling or most important or most significant or whatever. And let's spend a little bit of time having each commissioner do that. And we'll see if there's sort of how much divergence there is, how much consensus there is. And then we can try to do something with the groupings perhaps. But that's I'd like to try that. What do you all think? You're willing to indulge me and give it a try? All right, let's do that. Let's do that in round robin.
Also, Co-Chair Maeda, if it would help, I'm happy to put up a screen and capture the key ideas so we can sort of visually see them. Would that be helpful to do as well? Or do you just want the auditory?
Sure. Yeah, it might be helpful to some people, sure.
And then Co-Chair Maeda, before we do the round robin, I know Commissioner Stetcher has had his hand up, and then I also see Commissioner Vento's hand.
Let's do that then first, Commissioner Stetcher.
Commissioner Stetcher, you are muted.
I'm muted because my cursor was on the hub. I want to clarify what's accompanies the maps in the hub. If I understand this correctly, for each of the maps, if you click on the table, you will get the total population by racial ethnic group, but not percents, just total numbers. And then you'll get the percentage of the population for the citizen voting age population, not raw numbers, but percentages based on the 2019 data. I don't want to put more things on Pretty's plate, but it would be a lot more helpful if the total population was expressed as a percentage, or yeah, so that we could compare them and see if there's a significant drop. Otherwise, we have to calculate each one ourselves.
So I've been sort of calculating in my head to some extent on that, but I will say there was at least one map, I took a note somewhere, where the CVAP number was not expressed as a percentage. So unfortunately, it's not necessarily completely consistent. I have no idea why that was, but.
And I can interject here. So I went through and systematized everything. So all the maps on the hub should have the total population by race and then the percentage CVAP. From my understanding from, I believe, 2 or 3 meetings ago, that was the impression I got from the commissioners that they wanted.
Thank you, Todd.
Commissioner Bento, then Commissioner Wong.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I like this idea, Commissioner Maeda. However, here's my concern. I'm just concerned that we don't have Moldov's and the people's map as well. And I just feel like that's a kind of an important maps to consider. The other consideration I had, and this was just for a question to the commissioners. I know Commissioner Stetcher and Commissioner Kenny and Commissioner Holtzman both submitted maps. Are those maps we are going to include evaluation tonight in terms of what we thought about them? And the reason why I just ask is, I know Commissioner Holtzman, you have submitted, I think, at least 3 of them right now, and you plan to submit 2 more. So we're going to have multiple choices from that. Maybe we could hold off on the commissioner's maps tonight and look at the other ones before we zero in on the commissioner's maps, just to hear what the other ones have to say. It's just a thought in terms of the process.
And Commissioner Vento, like I said, I'm going to pare down the number of my maps that I'm offering for consideration by tomorrow night.
Commissioner Wong?
Yes, thank you. So I think I had mentioned this, but so Ty, to get the CVAP numbers and percentages, even the voting age percentages, and you can do that. He showed me how to do that in the hub, or yeah, I guess it's the hub. And so I think it could be done fairly easy. In fact, I'm sure Ty, you could do it really quickly, but so I think that has been very useful. That is very useful to have that information. The way that Pretty had done it before, for each map was also a good way to visualize it on the maps. But because Pretty probably doesn't have enough time to do that, if we added it to the maps on the hub, and I've already done that, but for my own personal maps, but then all the commissioners will be able to see the actual numbers, the actual percentages of both the total population and the CVAP numbers. And as I said, you could even do it for the voting age population, but that's probably not as important for broken down by race and ethnicity. So I would maybe suggest if people want to want that information, Ty, I don't know how long it would take to do that. Well, whether you did it or Pretty did it, I don't think it would take that long, but you should tell us. Thank you.
So I'm more than happy to do it as long as there's some clear guidance from the commissioners on what they would like to see on the hub. And just for clarity, with Commissioner Wong, I showed her how to do it on the mapping software. And the offer is still on the table for all the commissioners. If you do want any one-on-one time, more than happy to do that. Again, happy to put additional things on the hub, just with clear guidance. I do see Commissioner Kenny's hand.
Yes, I hope this is a simple question. I would like to see the total population and CVAP population for the entire county as well as the districts. In other words, I kind of have a feel for what the percentages are on total population, but I don't really know what the total CVAP is broken down by the different ethnicities in the county, and maybe that's available somewhere.
I'm sure it is available somewhere. I don't know who would have access to that information. Pretty, do you have access to that information? You're muted.
I can provide total population, total voting age population, citizen voting age population for the whole county by race and ethnicity.
Thank you. But
Okay.
where would that be available to be accessed?
I can provide it to Ty and he can make it available.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher, you're muted if you're.
I believe Commissioner Stetcher would like the round robin to start.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so Co-Chair Maeda, I have two options for this. I either have an Excel spreadsheet where I can have a tally of what maps people like, or I thought we were just going to do, are people just going to give narrative about the factors they want considered?
I thought it'd be most useful that we hear each commissioner express what the priorities or the factors they're looking at when they're looking at maps to say those things.
Okay. And if it's okay, I'm going to capture the key themes. And so if it's said once, I'm not going to retype it. Does that work for everyone?
Sure, unless you want to do a tick mark to indicate that more than one person said that.
Okay.
And apologies for asking, but I could really use a break. I don't know about other commissioners, but even just a 3-minute break would be great.
This is a good time. Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Hi, Cheryl. I'm a little tired. All right. It's okay. I got a little break.
Commissioner Mendoza, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I wasn't.
Yeah, go ahead and mute yourself there. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I
You
was.
bet.
We're at the 5-minute mark. Co-Chair Maeda, you're on mute.
If you all can gather back. All right, let's try this. Ty, if you're back, if you could start us off on the round robin.
All right, we're going to start off with Commissioner Orpanela Saguga.
Yes. So when I was looking at the map, I guess the things that stuck out to me or that I was looking at were ones that particularly kept the San Gabriel Valley together, because I know that there was a lot of feedback for that. And when I say San Gabriel Valley, I'd also like to point maps that kept Northeast LA, East LA, South LA, and that integrated Linwood, because that was a common theme in the public comments. I also looked at whether maps split cities or not, because that seemed to be a common theme as well, to try to keep cities whole. And I think those were the points that stuck out to me.
Commissioner Haile Soto. I believe.
Well, yes, sorry about that. So I was looking, we did receive a lot of public testimony, a lot of written, both verbal and written comments about San Fernando Valley, keeping it whole, as well as San Gabriel Valley. The area where I was conflicted was keeping both of those together simultaneously. It's difficult. There's going to have to be some compromises simply because of the populations. We still have the entire Antelope Valley and Santa Clarita with a population of nearly a little bit under 800,000 in that area. So that was one of the concerns. The other one was just maybe having a map, or I know most of the commissioners have expressed concerns about being able to clearly identify the 88 cities or 87, because LA City is going to have to be split proper, but at least just to be able to identify if any cities were split on the proposals. I was able to, just by glancing over some of the maps that were submitted, it seems like some cities were. And then I guess maybe I'll just echo the point that definitely I would like to have Maldiv's map as well as the People's block map submitted for review. Also had one of the latest maps that was submitted, I think Plan 27, seemed like did a good job at keeping the communities of interest as whole as possible. So that one seemed like a little bit different map, kept kind of the southern area of the county together. And Plan number 15, which was a little bit different approach, tried to keep most of the San Gabriel Valley and San Fernando Valleys together. I wasn't necessarily a fan of the pie split, it kind of like around the downtown area. But I think if there's support for it, maybe that one could be modified to avoid that pie split around the downtown area. And that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Zaida Soto.
Some of what I had in mind has already been shared, so I'll share maybe what hasn't, which for me, I think I was looking at the maps at a glance. I was looking at the spread of the districts, right, from end to end, because I know we heard from some of our community members that their communities were in the same district. I think we heard, for example, individuals in the Santa Clarita area talking about being in the same district as individuals kind of all the way on the other side of the San Gabriel, at the end of the San Gabriel Valley, for et cetera. And so I was looking at some of the maps in which districts went from, for example, the like Pacific Palisades all the way to, I think, somewhere near Pomona, right? Which, if you think about those are really quite far, areas that are really far away from each other. I was also looking for where there might be voter power dilution, right? So I'm thinking about the Asian community, the Black community, and where there's concentration and where some of the maps might be really diluting that voting power. I was also thinking about, same as others, like what were communities of interest that we heard a lot from, and how did these maps take those into consideration? And then I was also looking at, of course, CVAP numbers, and really the difference, when I looked at maps, and it seemed that perhaps some of these were majority minority districts, and then I look at the CVAP numbers, and then it's clear that some of these maps have either none or maybe just one majority district. So those were some just initial considerations or reflections that I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher.
Thank you. My video's off because I'm eating dessert, and I don't want to do that on screen. I agree with much of what's been said, and you kind of saw from my chart the things that jumped out to me visually in terms of the big COIs. But I agree with what Commissioner Soto just said, that it's, I have a preference for districts that are compact rather than elongated, and even though that's the fifth of the criteria, I think that's better in terms of governance. I think it's important to look at the CVAP numbers to make sure that we have appropriate minority voting opportunities. And I'd like to have at least one map that we put forward that is a little innovative or different, or doesn't chop things up in ways that are very familiar and similar. So I'm kind of fond of the pie map, but or there's another one that splits the coastline right down the middle. I like us to let the public have a chance to comment on a map that is different in some way, and see whether those kinds of changes actually resonate. Thanks.
Commissioner Bento.
Yes, I was just wondering, I think this is just more of a comment towards Commissioner Stetcher. Are you favoring the pie map because you're having dessert right now? That's just a joke, Ms. Commissioner Stetcher. But my point is, a lot of things have been already said. I will just point something out that I thought was interesting, and I don't know, maybe somebody can answer this question. I think it is map 006, and it was submitted by a private member. So I didn't know who actually submitted that map, but that is a very, very different map than any of the other maps that I've seen in terms of just the way it's split up. So I just thought that was just a very, very different one in terms of the layouts. And so those are my comments.
Co-Chair Williams.
I guess there's a lot that's already been said. I look at the CVAP numbers and the VAP numbers. I want to look at how well the communities of interest are kept together in cities. I also, I guess, because I heard it a lot, it came up a lot in our group. I was looking at how the unincorporated areas were handled too, because there are concerns of where are they, where do they fit best? So that was something that I looked at and was, and maybe it's just a pet peeve of mine, but making sure that their interests are included as well. And I guess that concerns, I guess the CVAP, and when I look at the maps, I'm looking at ethnic representation across all the maps to see how that's handled. And it's important to have the numbers and to see how they may have been represented in the districts that were drawn. So other than, I think that covers it for me.
Commissioner Wong?
Yes, thank you. Yes, a lot of the considerations, of course, have been mentioned. I may just elaborate a little bit on some of them. I think I had mentioned before, well, about the making sure, I guess it was Commissioner Soto saying, to avoid kind of vote dilution, at least kind of making sure that there could be communities of interest. And when I say communities of interest, I include groups, racial and ethnic groups, because I think they share common cultural backgrounds, and also some share similar languages. And so to me, whether a lot of the racial and ethnic groups are also considered communities of interest, of course. So I tried to look at it in terms of making sure that perhaps the Black community wasn't split too much, or the Asian community wasn't split up too much, or none of the communities, the Latino community or the white community, split up too much, and to where there was an ability to create a majority Latino district, that they took advantage of that. And that's why, in looking really closely at the CVAP numbers, because I was surprised that for many of the communities, well, for the Latino community, the difference in the number of the total population, and when you compare it to the CVAP numbers, decreased sometimes incredibly. And for a lot of the other communities, especially for the white community and even the Black and Asian communities, it wasn't as stark. For the Black and Asian communities, there were differences. Usually it increased, but it always increased for the white voting population. So I just wanted to make sure that, again, no communities would be diluted, and so or divided, I guess. And taking into account all the testimony that we got, trying to keep regions and cities together, San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley. Of course, we had received conflicting testimony. Some people wanted the North San Fernando Valley with the North County, and the southern part of the San Fernando Valley more with the urban areas. So, it is sometimes hard to just go by the public comments, but but it is helpful sometimes when we have to draw, I think, the boundaries, and we have to look more closely later on. Anyway, so that's how, and if we were to choose some maps, I would definitely, choose the People's Block and the MALDEF map. I also found map 16 interesting, because they supported some coalition districts, which I found useful. And there's probably a couple more, but I wanted to at least see the People's Block map and the MALDEF map and analyze it a little more, because I wanted to include those. But say if they weren't included, I probably would suggest some other maps. Thanks.
Commissioner Franklin?
Okay, thank you. All that has been said, ditto for me, particularly Commissioner Wong and Co-Chair Williams, their comments. I looked at the maps, and coincidentally, the maps that I had rated high were actually rated as well high when Pretty went in and did her evaluation. I would like, if once we determine on who we would like to bring forth to make a presentation to talk briefly about their maps, is 004, the San Fernando Valley. It would be interesting to have comments from the mapper for that map. Also, when I looked at Commissioner Stetcher, 018, he actually, what I was looking for, particularly because I have an affinity for Long Beach, because that's where I live, it's important that Long Beach not be split up. And I noticed there were a couple of the maps, 006, that split, had a propensity of splitting some of the COI in Long Beach. Particularly, I'm looking at Del Amo Boulevard. Del Amo Boulevard is a part of Long Beach, but it was being split to be in another district. So it's very important that Long Beach not have two supervisory districts. I also liked 017 as well, but 018 in the capturing of the description of what that map was consisting of, Commissioner Stetcher captured all, as much as possible, the public comments regarding COI. And so, and when I looked at it, Long Beach was kept whole. Some of the South Los Angeles area as well. One final comment, I would also like to take a look again at San Gabriel Valley, the Santa Monica Mountains, Antelope Valley, because there were a lot of comments regarding that as well. So we could have some of the mappers that did, put forth maps as relates to Santa Monica Mountains and the Antelope Valley. Thank you.
Commissioner Holtzman.
All right, first of all, I have heard several commissioners say that they're skipping over things that have already been said, which kind of saps the meaning out of the frequency column that I see appear on screen. And I would ask the chairs to please ensure that that frequency column is not included in any official report of this meeting. It'd be great to have the priorities laid out, but I do think it's premature for us to be voting on them. And again, we've lost the truth of the frequency as it is. So that's number 1 point. One point I have about maps in general, one thing I'm looking at, one thing I don't like is the U around the southern end of the county. I don't like seeing maps that go down the Santa Monica Bay beach cities, through Palos Verdes, through the port area, up through Long Beach, and continuing along the southeastern border of the county. I don't really think that's a particularly good unified community of interest. And anyway, just don't like that one. And I also think that it's important that the San Fernando Valley actually be split by social class, say, or ethnic grouping, or general types of housing, or environmental concerns, or whatever. I do think that there's been good good evidence presented of the central valley there being more working class and having a burden that's not shared by the rest of the valley in terms of environmental things. And finally, since what we're supposed to be doing here is a holistic process. So if it's going to be holistic, you really need to take a look at everything and, see how you feel about the differences and things like that. So I recommend to everybody printing all the maps that you're considering. Ideally, in an ideal world, we would have staff be printing out every map that we get on a high quality color printer and glossy paper, like legal size, and then express mailing all of them to us so that we could lay them out and compare them that way. I mean, when I was working as an environmental consultant, I had access to a printer like that. I'm fortunate to have a printer at home that can print in color. But the ink is expensive. I have been buying the ink for the printer, kind of as a donation to LAUSD because I live with a teacher. But I'm going to be printing tomorrow, that's for sure, tonight. And I encourage people to do that and then, lay them out on a table or on the floor and compare them, group them if you'd like, and see what, and then maybe that'll help you narrow them down. So those are my comments on this round at this point. Thanks.
Commissioner Kenny.
I hear the comments from the San Fernando Valley that they want the San Fernando Valley kept together. In looking at District 5, I was in the southern portion of District 5 for many years, and I felt that it was difficult for the supervisor to be aware of what the people who I consider to be in the San Gabriel Valley were what their concerns were. The eastern portion of the county, where you have the Pomona, Claremont area, is really split up among the different districts, and to some extent that is the same community of interest. So I favor keeping the San Gabriel Valley together. There aren't enough people in the Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita Valley for them to have their own district. So you have to dip down somewhere to get enough people to form a district. Or we have to decide that we want to be close to the 10% deviation and allow fewer people in District 5. I also think that District 4, where I currently reside, is not a community of interest. And so if the people on the eastern side of the county can be grouped in a more meaningful way, I think that would be an improvement. I think we need to be mindful of analyzing the existing supervisorial districts and comparing them to whatever we do, because I think we need to demonstrate that what we do is an improvement over the current map. Otherwise, I don't think that this commission will be a success.
Next is Co-Chair Maeda.
Thank you. So before I start, I want to just make a note of clarification. When I earlier had said that I had some emails from Commissioner Stetcher concerning the grouping and his chart. I just want to make it very clear this happened prior to the meeting. This was earlier in the day, and it wasn't as if we were secretly exchanging texts or emails during the meeting. So just clarification. For myself, certainly, we've had a couple months of public hearings, gathering community of interest input. We went through this exercise at COIG groupings and so forth. And so that clearly is part of my mindset when I'm looking at these maps. But I tried to make my own map, and I just had a heck of a time trying to keep the valley together and keep Antelope Valley with Santa Clarita without, and finding the population, as Commissioner Kenny said, finding the population to reach a district with the North County without either decimating San Gabriel Valley or grouping it with the San Fernando Valley. And so it's impossible really to, satisfy all the COI groupings, obviously. I do think it's important to keep San Gabriel Valley together. I think some of these maps just really carve it up in such a way as to be unrecognizable, and I generally disfavor that. When I'm looking at these maps, I am looking at, among other things, Latino citizen voting age population. I want to see ideally 2 districts with majority Latino citizens voting age population, or if not 2, then 1 with another one that is very high percentage. And I think the MALDEF map, or the MALDEF presentation called it an opportunity district. At a minimum, that 1+1. But also to have a Black opportunity district and an Asian opportunity district. And I found 3 maps that had those criteria, which I will just mention that I'm interested in. Map 2, Mr. Clayton's map, 2 Latino citizen voting age population majority districts, one 20.5% Black district, one 25% Asian district. Commissioner Stetcher's map 18, same, a Black opportunity district and Asian population district. Holtzman's map 22, Commissioner Holtzman's map 22, 2 Latino citizens voting age district majority, and Black opportunity district, Asian opportunity district. I think those were definitely worth looking at. With regards to the People's Bloc and MALDEF ones, I want to see more data on that. If we can get that from Priti tomorrow, that'd be great. I will note though that the MALDEF map is very interesting. It's very frank in when it was dividing cities, and it said, this is why we divided Long Beach the way we did, or we wanted to divide Torrance. We knowingly are dividing a city, but this is why. There is an error in the MALDEF presentation saying something about keeping West Torrance with North Gardena. I think they got that reversed. It's North Torrance. I went to school in Gardena and Torrance. So it's North Torrance and South Gardena, I guess, or Eastern Gardena, not sure. Anyways, that's the grouping that they meant. But that map, does some interesting things. And to Commissioner Stetcher's point, I think it's useful to have a map or 2 that does something unexpected. And, perhaps we should, consider that as well. But in general, we have no shortage of quality maps to consider. And I would think we want to come up with a couple of different kinds of things to throw out there to get public input on. I would certainly favor that. Finally, visually, I poo-pooed compactness, but when you look at these maps visually and you see ones that have districts that are just snaking from one end of the county to the other, or just having these crazy shapes, to me, that just looks bad. It looks like a gerrymandered district in a sense. Now, maybe the gerrymandering is for, positive reasons or good reasons or whatever, but I agree. I think it's Commissioner Stetcher who said that doesn't make for good governance to have a district that is just wildly an odd shape or really far from one end of the district to the other than the North County district, which just can't be helped because it's just so big. It's going to have to be big anyways. So those are my initial thoughts.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Thank you. And my apologies for not muting during our break. Sorry about that. I don't know if my thoughts are conventional or contrarian, but I don't think that we're dealing with supervisorial districts currently that are broken per se. That's not to say that they shouldn't be changed, because I think they will. But my priority criteria for evaluation of the maps, I think, is going to sound rather pedestrian to compared to those that I've already spoken. But I was looking at rebalancing of the, not necessarily in this order, but the rebalancing of the district populations where it thought it might be necessary. We know that we're trying to, the Board of Supervisors is supposed to represent the county's diverse population. So having been born, raised, live my whole life in the county of Los Angeles, I was basically taking what I know about the county and sort of looking at these different maps and thinking about how best to do this. So my own personal views on things, and certainly taking into consideration compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, and remembering the packing and the cracking and the gerrymandering and the voter polarization, those things that we've learned over time, or at least I have more recently, to try to figure out how best to go about making something better, again, that I don't think is necessarily broken. So, I was also looking at maintaining and bettering the geographic integrity of the cities, the neighborhoods, the communities of interest. And that's basically the way I was looking at this. And I think one of my takeaways is that, the San Gabriel Valley, I think, should remain intact. And we can talk about what that means and how many cities that it should include, because right now it's almost 40% of 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles itself. Maybe the same can happen with San Fernando Valley, but there's other issues that are going to make it difficult for that to be practical and feasible. And then some of you that actually live and know more about the different areas, I'm relying upon you as commissioners to talk about, and I've already heard Commissioner Maeda, Co-Chair Maeda, just talk about the area that you're most familiar with. So I'm hoping that we can continue to have this dialogue and interaction, and we can share our personal experience so that we can provide some support and buttress some of the things that we think should happen or ought to happen, and maybe not. So that's where I am right now.
Mr. Morales.
Yes, thank you. So just in terms of, a little bit of what Commissioner Mendoza just said in terms of like the area that I know best, so the San Gabriel Valley. I was looking at some of the maps, and in terms of how they were breaking up, South Amani, Almani, and though we got like a lot of community of interest input saying we want, keep them together. So I was looking for those types of places that were just being, separated despite, the public comment that was given regarding that. The CVAP information is also very important to me as well. Keeping the San Fernando Valley together, I think we heard a lot about that. And I was looking also in terms of the Asian American population, the African American population as well, and some of these opportunity areas, as mentioned in the MALDEF map. So those are some of the considerations I was looking into. I did like some of the maps that I'm interested in exploring further are, the People's Block, MALDEF, and Commissioner Stetcher's, it's either 18 or 19. It is a different way of looking at things. Maybe, it is something that as a comparative analysis to, maybe some of the comments that we'll get once these maps are out into the world. But there are different ways of doing this and different ways of looking at it. And I think that's a healthy perspective. So yeah, I think folks have said a lot, and I try to just kind of like ditto as much as I could. So I'll hand it back.
Commissioner Obregon.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my main idea is compactness. I think it's, that geographic spread, coast all the way to Claremont, that doesn't make sense to me. Also, the San Gabriel Valley is divided. And so making the San Gabriel Valley more compact would be a good thing. I've reviewed the map, all of them, MALDEFs and everything. And I guess if I had to say which one right now, I would go with number 18, Stetcher's, I think. I thought it was a very compact and fair use of the county land. So if I had to pick one now, number 15 was kind of interesting. It kind of reminded me of a pie approach, cutting the pie into 5 parts, and everybody had a finger into downtown or metro. It was mentioned that a little bit of a different approach might be good. So with that in mind, that one did stick out. So we'll leave it at that, those basic 3 ideas.
Clarification, Commissioner Obregon, was it map 5 or 15? There was
the pizza one was 15 that I saw for Raza.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, have we gone through it, or is there?
Yes, we've gone through all the commissioners.
Okay, I see Commissioner Holtzman's hand. I don't know that we want to go through another round of comments, but let's go ahead and take a few more hands then.
So we have Commissioner Holtzman, then Commissioner Stetcher, and Commissioner Saida Soto.
Okay, the first thing I want to say is add a couple of helpful tips to my suggestion about printing the maps. The first tip is use the base map that's called streets before you print. Make sure that's the base map, because I think that gives the best detail and information, underlying information that you'll see when you can print the maps. So look for the base map called streets. The second thing is, rather than using the print function from the program, which will give you, the whole situation, including Catalina and San Clemente, and will make everything else too small, use the screen grab function on your computer. Windows 10, I think, there's something called Snip and Sketch you can use. I know Macintoshes have a similar function, and zoom into the level that you're interested in, so that the lines that you're most interested in are as big as possible in your printout, so you'll be able to see them, and try and use a consistent scale if you can. So anyway, base map, streets, use screen grab, and then print. Save the image and print it however you print images. Second thing is, I probably be remiss if I don't mention that it looks like Senator Bob Huff, former state senator Huff, has submitted a map. And I should mention that Senator Huff reached out to me on behalf of an existing supervisor to encourage me to get on this commission. And he was working with staff of that existing supervisor. So that just should be on everybody's mind as a factor to consider. Now, just last of all, I just wanted to echo Co-Chair Maeda. I really, because of, I have had problems dealing with the North County, because it can't be just its one district. And that's largely because there's this huge redistricting unit that runs from the eastern border of the county, subsuming like most of the Angeles National Forest, all the way west of Santa Clarita and San Fernando. And without the ability to split that up by census tract or block, there's very few options for connection. So I did submit another connection today, and I'm gonna have a look at it and see if I like that one better than the first one. But these things look a little funny because of that huge redistricting unit. All right, so those are my comments, just that I would add. But please, I hope you take my tech tips and use them. I think it'll help.
Commissioner Stetcher, then Commissioner Saida Soto.
I wanted to ask if we can reach out to MALDEF and the People's Bloc and ask them to submit their maps in some kind of a file that's easily sucked into the software. Maybe they already have, but certainly every other submitter was able to use our system, and any good piece of software ought to be able to produce a transferable file. it would help an awful lot, because I too am interested in seeing those. And I found the MALDEF one extremely hard to view because of the multi-colors and the zoom factor that I couldn't control. Thanks.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
I wanted to just add two other thoughts, consideration. One is I was expecting more maps from groups than we have received, given how many comments we received from groups representing sort of broader sectors of population. So I'm hoping that they're working on them and we will see more. I think the other category that I was thinking of that it just has been difficult to see in the maps, and that maybe more because maybe I need additional training, but I had to use sort of my knowledge of the County of Los Angeles, as Commissioner Kenny has stated or reminded us of, to think about resources that are in the shifting of district, resources that currently may be in a district that are essential to communities that may be shifted into other districts and away from certain communities. So I think the People's Block map certainly allowed or included parks and other resources. And again, I think I've said this before, but I'm hoping to get some guidance on how, in looking at these maps, we might be able to incorporate again that layer or those layers, again, resources that are essential to communities. Also, because that was part of public comment, right? Groups or individuals stating that they share health resources or public green spaces, transportation, etc.
Thank you, Commissioner Saida Soto. I will mention that as far as groups are concerned, at least the MALDEF one and the People's Block one purport to incorporate the views or whatever of multiple organizations, right? And so, we heard from many different organizations who more or less coalesce behind the People's Block, and I assume that that map is the consensus map that those organizations have agreed to. I could be wrong,
right
but they are listed.
No, I think you're right about that. I think we heard from others, and maybe it's worth looking for me to look at what organizations were included in that.
Right. And as to Commissioner Stetra's comment, Gayla, is this something that you can reach out to MALDEF and People's Block to see whether they can get their maps in a form that is easier for us to manipulate and review?
Yeah. Actually, Ty, you're the one who've been in direct communication with them and receiving the maps. What is your thoughts?
So right now, the software that we have with Esri, the atomic unit is with RDUs, but both the People's Block and MALDEF, they in their own software use the census block for their own reasons. And so the way that Esri has RDU set up, that was created by the county as a way to split block groups that span multiple cities or areas or regions, so that we're working with less geographical units. And so all the shapefiles are already available for ArcBridge, and they're also available to download by any users, including the commissioners on the hub themselves. And so if the commissioners would like, I might recommend for the commissioners to also maybe ask ArcBridge to do a live demonstration of the two in the external software.
Preeti, can you do that?
Which external software would be required? Is it something that's available to all of us?
Just the mapping software, right, Ty, that you're talking about?
It's an external software from the county redistricting one because of the atomic unit used. Again, the software that everyone has access to on the website is using RDUs, where both People's Block and MALDEF are using census blocks. And so, as an example, the People's Block, they may have split block groups differently than how the county split it to make RDUs.
I think I understand. I pretend I understand what the difference is, but the thing I don't understand is whether we all have access to software that could be used for viewing these, or whether that is something we would have to go and obtain.
So perhaps that's a question for Preeti and Gayla.
Actually, I don't have an answer to it. I mean, it's really a pretty question. Just so everybody understands, the reason the RDUs were used was so that you would have clearly defined where the boundaries were between cities and unincorporated areas. And it could be those maps are going to have some challenge if you do a frequency count of cities that may be split, which might mean the blocks are just off, which is why it would be preferable if they could have used the ESRI software. Preeti, do you have the ability to import their maps to make them more user-friendly in another format?
Yeah. What I'm going to do is import them, and they will not match up 100% with the ESRI software, but I can import them, and I can provide it for use. But if you try to use it in the application, it won't match up 100%. There may be areas where it doesn't match, but regardless, I can process it and provide you with the data.
Is that something that could be made available tomorrow, Preeti?
I'm just looking at the shape files, and then it possibly could be available tomorrow.
Okay, Commissioner Holtzman, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. I would like to point out that I have requested of the chairs and consultant to restore the functionality of having areas selectable by the official census geography units that we had when the demo version of the software, when the software was out for us to learn how to use it, and as a demo version before we had the up-to-date census data adjusted. I'm not saying that we should take away the RDUs as a selection layer, but to me, that's the complete database that we're required to provide in our software per statute. And the RDUs, I will also note, are units that were fabricated by county staff who have worked with the supervisors and their representatives before on redistricting. So I don't really consider that effort by county staff to be particularly independent of supervisors. So, we should have, I just think, it's kind of a bait and switch. We had the districts, we had the census data, we had the census geography, and now we don't. Now we just have our RDUs. So, and that's made it very difficult for me to import maps as I drew them before while we were looking at the demo software, and to make some better looking correct connections of North County to the rest of the county. So anyway, just to let you know, I have requested that we get the census geography back in our software so we can use it, and so that those maps that have been submitted to us with census geography borders can easily and accurately, 100% accurately, be imported to our hub, et cetera. Thanks.
And I certainly will acknowledge that that has created an issue for you and for perhaps some other submitters who wanted to use the more discrete blocks. But I have to say that the RDUs were challenging enough that going to an even more discrete unit, I think, would have been even more difficult and more, it would be, as I understand it, computing power is an issue as well in terms of those more discrete units. But I do have to say, just calling something a bait and switch is, it's offensive, Commissioner Holtzman. There was a discussion about census blocks, then there was a discussion about RDUs. We have presentations about why we would want to use RDUs instead of census blocks. There was ample notice opportunity for you to weigh in on that. It was discussed in the working group, was discussed in our commission meetings. We made the decision to go with the RDUs, and there's no bait and switch fraudulent aspect to it whatsoever. I wish you would refrain from using those kind of pejorative types of statements to describe our process, which is nothing of the sort.
Well, I totally disagree with you on that, and I do think it was a bait and switch. One of my jobs was as a consumer rights attorney, and I was very involved in making consumers have better rights with regards to software. And what I see here was a classic bait and switch. Your, demo version had a functionality. We had talked about having redistricting units available. The commission never made a policy decision that only redistricting units should be used in drawing these redistricting maps. If we had, then groups like MALDEF and People's Bloc would have had to follow that policy decision. The only decisions that have been made on this have been made at the chair level. And I think excluding the official census geography would have been a decision to make at the commission level. And I think even if the commission had made that decision, it would violate the law, because we're supposed to have a complete and accurate database available for mapping for commissioners and for the public. And it's not complete and accurate unless you're breaking it out to the official census geography level. By bait and switch, I mean, look, we had a functionality, and then all of a sudden we don't have a functionality. And I think that's a very appropriate term to use in describing what happened here.
I totally disagree, but can I ask our counsel, are we in compliance with the law in every respect by providing the software in RDU format?
Yes, we are. The section of the code requires that we have a complete and accurate computerized database. It's the same one available to commissioners as to the public. And there's been no evidence or no suggestion that I'm aware of that the RDUs themselves don't incorporate and all of the complete and accurate information from the census blocks. So we are in compliance with the law.
And I'm making the suggestion that we're not, because it can't be complete.
Thank you.
Without having the, without
Thank
having
you,
the
Commissioner
complete census
Holtzman.
geography.
Thank you. Commissioner Kenny?
Yes, thank you. As someone who played around with the software when it was census block versus RDUs, I was trying to respect city boundaries, which the census blocks don't necessarily do. And I think that for also the county staff, my recollection is that the county staff told us that the county operates and provides its services using RDUs. So if we end up with a map based on RDUs, not only will we be automatically respecting city boundaries and unincorporated area boundaries, but we will also be enabling the functionality of the county to continue to operate. So I think there was a reasoned decision to use the RDUs.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Commissioner
Stetcher?
Stetcher.
You're going to be in violation of statute if we don't issue a map by December 15th. And if we don't start discussing maps now, we're not going to make that deadline.
Thank you. I am open for considering how to use our time as a commission. I think there's a lot of work that could be done by individual commissioners in grappling with the maps that have been submitted. But is there a suggestion for how to use this time right now? We do have another item on the agenda, as well as the staff report, so forth. But how do you all want to use this time?
If I may, Co-Chair Maeda, a number of people had identified maps that they thought were worth focusing on. Would it be useful to compile that list so we can begin to see if there's any patterns that might be then useful going into the meeting tomorrow so that people can be really prepared to focus on maps? Or do we want to wait to do that first thing in the meeting tomorrow?
Would people find that helpful? Not everyone did identify specific maps. I do want people, I do suggest we come to the meeting tomorrow with, let's say, 3. And if you can't narrow it down to 3, you have to have 4 or 5, then okay. But you need the top maps that you want us to further consider, not the ones that, you know, these are your votes and, you know, this is it, but ones that you think are worth us delving into more deeply. And then we can put those up. But if you all want to spend this time now to look at some of these maps that some folks have identified, we can do that. Or we can just, you know, get whatever other additional information you think you need that isn't available on the website and go off and individually do the work, because I think that, at least for me, I know I need to do a lot more work with these existing map, you know, the existing information that is available.
Okay, we have a few hands.
Sure.
We have Commissioner Morales, then Co-Chair Williams, Commissioner Orpanela-Segura, and then Commissioner Setcher.
Just a point of clarification. We had a second component to this discussion. Is that what the item agenda that you're talking about, in inviting some of the groups that have put together these maps?
So there had been discussion about inviting presentations. You know, we can still try to do that. I guess the difficulty I would have with that is we would be selecting certain ones and not others. I don't know that there's a really, we've gotten far enough along that we have a process for being able to make that determination. I think what we can do, I think what is reasonable to think we might be able to do is by the end of tomorrow, select 3, 4, 5, perhaps maps that we would go to the public with in public hearings. In the course of the public hearings, invite the map drawers to make presentations to us. Again, once we are in the public hearing process and we hear something that makes us want to you know, change one of the maps that we presented, we can still do that. We're still, you know, able to do those kinds of changes. But having presentations of those map drawers that presented the maps that we've selected for presentation to the public, I think is maybe the way to go with that. That's my suggestion.
Sounds good.
Co-Chair Williams.
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Co-Chair Maeda. I think for our priority is to get some maps identified so that we can post them for the public hearings. And I think to spend our time tomorrow, I think what's effective and what would be very useful is for each of us to identify our top maps, whether it's probably three maps or so, and have a discussion of those. Then so that we're moving toward narrowing our maps down. And again, we can then perhaps identify someone to some of our map people who submitted maps to come in and make some presentations to us. But I don't think we're ready yet to invite some of the submitters to come in and do presentations. But I think our first goal is to start to try to find a process to narrow this down. I think bringing identifying 3 maps and having some discussions around those as the commissioners is the way to go. And that's for tomorrow, because I think tomorrow is where we need to have at least concluded our top maps that we'd like the public to review and comment on.
We have Commissioner Orpanela-Segura, then Commissioner Stetcher, and Commissioner Mendoza, and then Commissioner Wong.
For the maps that we'd like to suggest to review, are we able to also suggest like modifications? Like let's say we, are in general agreement with the map, but would like to see some modification to it. I just want to make sure that I submit complete information.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stetcher, then Commissioner Mendoza, and then Commissioner Wong.
Can we individually send our map reference numbers to Gayla during the day tomorrow so she can compile them and bring the list to the meeting, making the meeting more efficient? Does that allowed under the Brown Act?
So Holly should weigh in. I was told we could not do that kind of a survey. We'd have to do it in public.
Well, it's not a survey. It's
Holly,
separate communication. But you're right.
I think we're better off just having the initial round robin where we go through and you list your maps, you list your top maps. And I think for efficiency purposes, it just list those three and then defer to the public comment. I mean, not public comment, but defer discussion till after that quick round robin where the three get posted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mendoza, then Commissioner Wong, and Commissioner Segura.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there, or do we have a hard cutoff date for review of maps or submission of maps at this point?
Are you talking about the maps that we go to the public with in public hearings?
That's correct.
So working backwards from December 15th, we would want to have some amount of time after the close of public hearings for us to grapple with and then select a map. Let's say ideally a couple of weeks or at least 10 days or so. From that date, you go back 30 days because each there has to be 2 public hearings 30 days apart. So let's say you have December 1st as one public hearing, the last public hearing. That means you got to go to November 1st, which means then from that date, you have to have 7 days. So basically tomorrow is the short answer is we've got to decide tomorrow.
Okay, so maps submitted after tomorrow will not be considered?
So we can always consider maps, but we were going to the public with however many maps we agreed to go to the public with for public hearings. If people submit additional maps, and I mean, Holly can weigh in on this, whether what is appropriate, but if someone submits a map, we haven't seen that map before, it's fantastic, but it's kind of like this one and it's kind of like that one, then I think we can change one of the maps that we went to the public with to sort of incorporate some of those ideas. Is that right, Holly?
That's right. So let me just capture 2 concepts here. One is we need to start the 30-day period for the hearing. We need to start that clock ticking, and we have to give 7 days notice of that first hearing. So we've got 37 days, right? That, to get to the end of 30 days, we have 37 days after we post the notice. So that's the first idea. The second idea is that this is an iterative process. It will continue to be an iterative process. But we do have to, for the public hearings, we have to give 7 days notice, just like before. And so we can, and I would expect that there would be public comments that come in that say we favor map option D, but with this tweak that may get support from the commission, and the commission may say, oh, we like that, and direct Pretty to make that change so that at the next public hearing that is on the table, or at the public hearing that's maybe not immediately the next one, but the one after that. So there is this process, an iterative process. So even after the public hearings close and you are evaluating a map, you may still tweak a map a little bit around the edges as you enter your final debate and discussions. So there is room. It's not as though you have to put up these 3 and you're forever barred from changing them or considering a new map. It's an iterative process, but we do have to get the clock started and want to give meaningful maps for public comment, even in this first hearing.
Thank you. I understand. My second question is, have we decided to move forward with Commissioner Stetcher's means to evaluate these maps?
I guess I would say no, in the sense that we are not tonight going to try to figure out which is the best of all the ones that keep the valley together, the San Fernando Valley together, which are the ones that we're not going to do that. I guess we don't have any tool that would be really useful in aiding that process. I think that the chart actually is helpful if you decide this is really one of my priorities is to do this thing. Then those are the maps that do that one thing, if that's an important consideration for you.
Okay.
But I think with this point, we should try for come with your top 3, and then we can have a deeper dive into the ones that seem to have the most traction.
No, I appreciate that. And so then are we having ArcBridge make further modification to the model that has been used to this point in time?
I mean, you all could say what you think. I don't see that that's a particularly useful exercise, but maybe you all feel differently.
I don't necessarily. I'm just, we have some very, very important decisions to make, and it'd be nice to have a really good tool. And we talked about this many months ago, the support that we're going to have, and be able to basically come up with the metrics and the information, have a dashboard. And I'm not feeling that we have that. So we're driving a car now that we're not familiar with. So I'm doing my best. That's all I can say.
Commissioner Wong, then Commissioner Orpanella Segura.
I just have several suggestions for us just to get us started a little bit. So some of us did suggest some maps that we would like to put on that list. And so just to get the process started, Gayla, in fact, suggested that we start with those maps, the identified maps that some of us identified tonight. And then we can add to that to either people could send their maps, suggested maps to Gayla, or we can do that tomorrow in a round robin. And then the other recommendation I would make is, I don't think this loop was closed. I do think it would be helpful for the commissioners to add just a couple of additional data points in the hub for the maps. So right now we have the numbers for total population, and but not the percentages, or do I have that backwards? I can't remember now. And then we have, I think, the percentages for the CVAP numbers, but not the total numbers. At any rate, those two data points can be added to the hub, and we could direct our staff, either Ty or Priti, to do that. And that way, all of the commissioners will be able to go into the hub and see all the CVAP numbers and percentages, and all the total population numbers and percentages, at least for the maps that 25 maps that are in there. And then finally, I just want to just remind folks that even if we do issue some maps by Friday and call them our public maps, if we have a range of map options, we are going to be continuing to talk about this and continuing to research these. I know that I'll take the time, I will have more time to kind of look into these a little more and tweak the boundaries or tweak the lines more. So I think we should think about that if we pick enough of a range of maps, that's why I was encouraging us to pick more than 3, then we could adapt. We probably will be able to adapt any of those maps to one that we would, like a more finalized versions of maps, and narrow it down that way too. Thanks.
Commissioner Orpanella Segura.
Yes, I wanted to know if I can provide my recommendations for maps now, because I had notified Gata that I am not able to make tomorrow's meeting, and I don't want to miss the opportunity to be able to share. And seeing that, we're not able to email, I just want to provide my feedback if that's okay at this time.
That sounds appropriate.
Okay. So my recommendation is map 8. But I do have some modifications to that. And it's, so Downey should be with District 4, Pasadena with District 5, and El Monte staying within District 1.
Okay, I'm not that fast. Read it, say it again.
Okay, so this is for map number 8. Downey.
Yeah.
Modified the line to keep Downey within District 4. Pasadena with District 5. And El Monte with District 1. People's Block.
What number?
I did not get the
12.
number. I just
Number
wrote
12.
Thank you. 12.
What number?
12. Modifications here is to maintain North El Monte and El Monte together. And add Duarte to District 1. Remove Pico, Rivera, and Whittier from District 1 and into District 4. And then 26 with no modifications. Thank you for the opportunity.
What I would suggest is that we then do not discuss whatever the next agenda item is, but go to the agenda item of the bylaws, see if we can knock that one out, and then just end so that we can now individually go back and try to work on our map analyses.
We have public comments, I think.
Not on the what we've been discussing, which we already had public comments on, which is 5A or 4A, 5A.
That's right.
Or 5B.
Or 5B.
So we
No, I'm sorry, 5B, we did not get to 5B. 5A is all we've been discussing so far. So let's skip 5B because we didn't get far enough on that, and do 5C, which is the bylaws change. We already discussed this.
Before we leave this item, I think it's important that I point out that the People's Block Plan number 12 is missing from the software everyone's shared group. And I think that's because if you export the shapefile from the hub and import it into the software, you can't submit that plan because it violates the I think contiguity rule. So if you're going to advocate for the People's Block Plan, you're going to have to make a little bit of modification to it at least, because of the way it goes into the software that we're using.
Okay, maybe Pretty, you can look into that. We obviously can't have a map that is non-contiguous. That might be just a quirk of transferring from the census block to the RDUs. I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. So, okay, 5C, we previously raised this in a special meeting, but we were not able to adopt the bylaw change. Let's just go to the section where we're planning to change the red line. Okay, so we're planning to add to 4.08 C2 the words or predictions where it's indicated there. And then add the underscored part. I'm sorry, so if you can just go back to 4.08 C2. So in addition to the or predictions,
There was no other changes.
oh, that was, okay, that was just for some reason.
The
that was
underlining
underscored. Okay.
was for
So-
training purposes.
Right.
On
So
behavior.
the bylaw change would be to add or predictions to 4.08 C2 and also change 6. Oh, no, sorry, getting myself confused. Change 4.08 C, 4.08 E.
It's E under, yeah. The internet, media, social media.
Okay, that's E, and the change is in the next slide.
Yeah.
So you see above the current E and then the proposed change. So we're changing instead of just internet/social media, we're just changing it to media. We're striking some of the language, internet platform, social media website, and basically broadening this to cover all media, non-interactive and interactive media. And you'll see the change there in red. That's the proposed addition. Is there discussion on this, further discussion on this since we've previously discussed it?
I see Commissioner Holtzman, your hand is up, or is that from previous? No, from previous, okay.
Is there any further discussion on this?
Move for approval.
So Commissioner,
We probably need to take public comment on it
oh,
before.
you're right, you're right. Let's take public comment, if any, on this agenda item.
So I currently see no interest in making a public comment on this agenda item. Would you like to close public comment?
Let's close public comment on this agenda item regarding bylaw change. Who was it that Commissioner Mendoza, you made a motion to approve these changes as indicated on the slides?
I did.
Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Commissioner Franklin? I can't see on
That
this.
was Co-Chair Williams.
Oh, Co-Chair Williams. Okay, Co-Chair Williams. I only see like 5 people here on the side of my Zoom. Is there any further discussion? Let's take roll. Ty.
Okay, commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. I will now take roll call. Commissioner Haile Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Saido Soto.
Approve.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Aye.
Commissioner John Vento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Wong.
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Holtzman.
Yes.
Commissioner Kenny.
Yes.
Co-Chair Maeda.
Aye.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Obregon.
Yes.
And Commissioner Orpanello Segura.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next item was that staff report. Yes.
This is very brief. I just want to do the timeline, which was already covered earlier. The goal is to select the maps to go into public posting notification for 7 days. The goal is to do that by tomorrow night. You do have the flexibility, as Holly pointed out, that when you go into the public hearings with your maps, you can do more than 3. The public will weigh in, and you'll end up, if you start out with options A, B, C, D, maybe E, that you may end up with option D, 2, 3, 4, 5, because people will be weighing into it. But we do want to make sure we post not only for the 7 days, but we start ideally the public hearings by a week from Friday or over the weekend. That would bring you into the first week in December, when you would have completed the 30 days of the public hearings and could then deliberate on the final maps. Commissioner Stetcher, you raised your hand.
Not to interrupt, but to make a request after the end of your remarks.
Okay. I'm just really reinforcing that we are going to encourage you to block out every Wednesday evening for the public hearings. I almost have the survey completed where we can figure out the best date for the quorum. for the first public hearing. But again, I'm going to wait until we get through tomorrow night because that's when our 7-day posting begins. And that's my report, other than I've asked the executive office to provide Spanish interpreters for our public hearings. I find it interesting. I have received no requests for interpreters throughout this entire year. But I do anticipate that we will have Spanish speakers attending, so I just think it would be a good practice. And that's it.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I see Commissioner
Commissioner
Stetcher's hand up.
Stetcher.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Stetcher.
Yes, I would like to be able to look at the MALDEF map. And what I find now on the hub is that each of the detailed pages is partially removed. I can't scroll to the right, but as I recall in a previous presentation, maybe from ArcBridge, they had PowerPoint slides that showed the districts complete. And I'd like to have access to those or somehow make that available so those of us who want to look at that map can at least see at a large scale the districts.
Ty, I also think if you check on the meetings, you'll see their PowerPoint that goes with it, which will be useful for you to see as well. Ty, do you want to address that?
So what we have on the hub is what MALDEF requested to be uploaded. It's their presentation that they provided with the screenshots of the specific maps as well as some of the narratives. In the description themselves, again, you can download the presentation as well as the shape files. But as mentioned before, Commissioner Stetcher, if you do not have the external software with the census block as the atomic unit, I would recommend reaching out to ArcBridge for that perhaps wider concept.
Well, my needs would be met if I can download the presentation from that night's agenda and then look at it in PowerPoint because the full PowerPoint slides present the complete map. But what I see on the hub slices each one.
So that's the, I'm sorry, but the presentation that's on the hub at the moment is what MALDEF provided. I'm not sure which other presentation you were referring to.
No, I'm mistaken. It's not with the meetings, it's on the hub. So
I'm not sure where I saw it, but at some point maybe I downloaded it from the hub and then looking at it in PowerPoint, I was able to see the full slides. We can deal with this later, but I do think a lot of commissioners would like to see those full slides before tomorrow.
I'm going to share my screen because I was able to open the PowerPoint earlier. Let's just see what I'm seeing versus what you're seeing. Is this what you're seeing here? Because it seemed to be complete, the PowerPoint slides here. You're on mute, Commissioner Stetcher.
Commissioner
I'm
Stetcher.
sorry. Maybe.
Commissioner Stetcher, it is in this PowerPoint. You want to see did you want to see the whole map in one? If it is on here, Gail, if you go to near the beginning of when the chart, when the lines are, the maps drawn, it is in there, Commissioner Stetcher, you know, a complete one with all of the lines. It compares it to the current and it also has their new one in this PowerPoint.
And you can click here for the shapefile or download the full presentation, which is the PowerPoint. Maybe, do you want, I don't know if Ty could help you separately.
Yeah. So,
Commissioner Stetcher tomorrow when it's not during this meeting.
Yeah, and Commissioner Stetcher, you are muted. I do
Yes,
want to mention.
I'll talk to Ty, and I misspoke. It was not MALDEF, but it was the People's Bloc, and and I can't see the right-hand slide, but I'll deal with this in conversation with Ty.
Sounds good. And while we're on the topic, is there guidance on how the commission would like the hub to change in regards to data points?
Well, I think you heard that some of the commissioners want to have percentage of population for each district with regards to a racial ethnic breakdown.
Okay. And just for clarity, is that in lieu of the absolute number or in addition to the absolute numbers?
And it's in addition. I think we should have the numbers and percentages for both the total population and for CVAP.
And I can totally do that. And another question I did have, and just to a point that Commissioner Vento had brought up earlier, do the commission, would they prefer the username or the name of the submitter within the parentheses?
What's the difference, Ty? I'm confused. The username?
The username. So for example, just using Commissioner Kenny as an example, Commissioner Kenny's username is mkenny, and that's what is put OP017 parentheses mkenny. But does the commission prefer 0P017 Mary Kenny?
Any burning desire to have it one way or the other? Commissioner Holtzman?
Yeah, the name much better. But I also have one more question for Ty about better data or a request. Would it be okay if I gave that now?
Okay, so Ty, the name of the submitter if possible.
Okay.
And my request is to learn how to add or rearrange or delete columns in what's called the district window in the software, in the Esri Redistricting online software. So we can use different attributes there, add some, and that would really help us perform some more analyses.
Can you maybe get with Ty separately to see if that's possible?
Yeah, totally fine. I think he knows what the district window is. It's the thing that pops out or comes back in if you push district window under the view tab.
And just one final thing, this is the other people's block map. So I think it's showing whole on my screen. So Commissioner Stetcher, maybe you should.
Yeah, it is not showing whole on my screen, so I will work with Ty. They are all being sliced off.
Okay.
Smaller ratio. Okay.
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 Anything more? Anything further tonight? Seeing none, our meeting is adjourned, but please, our work continues. Come tomorrow night, 6:30 with your top 3 maps, ideally 3, and we'll see if we can hammer out the ones that we want to present to the public. Thank you, everybody. I know you're all working hard, and staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Bye.